This is Pod Populi.
Podcast for the people.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy, the host of Living in Santa Barbara, and I wanted to give you a heads up that the podcast is going through a little transition right now, and you might notice some quirks as we get everything set up, so I apologize for that, but hopefully everything will smooth up pretty quickly. I also wanted to check in with you and see what you're all thinking. Do you like the show? Because it started off as a side project to my real estate business, and it seems to be growing into something bigger and something more meaningful. You know, as I've been meeting new guests and listening to their stories, I realize that this podcast isn't just about living in Santa Barbara. It's about the art of living. It's about the grit and the passion and the celebration, the empathy, and everything in between that exists here. So the stories have been shaping how I see this town. And it's also been opening me up to new perspectives and reminding me of just how important it is to connect with others. It really hit home to me this week. I went down to Orange County to drop off some things at my son's dorm room. And, when I was inside the apartment that he shares with 3 other young men, I noticed an interesting dynamic. His roommates were home, but they weren't talking to each other at all. One roommate came home and he didn't say, "Hi, I'm home," nothing, just no interaction. And then they were just like walking around each other like they were avoiding obstacles. It was a little uncomfortable to me. I had to talk to my son about it, and he told me that it was normal, that they usually just do their own thing. Well, this is kind of weird to me. I was wondering, were they acting that way because I was there? Do they have anything in common? Or is this the new norm with young people? So then I asked him about the other students that lived in the building, and he said he didn't know anyone living on his floor. I was like, really? Because when I was in college, I knew everybody on the floor and in the building, and we all hung out together. So I said, why don't you go knock on your neighbor's door and introduce yourself and say, "Hey, I live next door, and if you need anything, stop by." And he thought that nobody does that and that it would be weird to knock on somebody's door out of the blue. Why is this so weird to knock on your neighbor's door and introduce yourself? He just said that nobody does it and it's just weird. I mean, to me, something is only weird if you think it's weird, right? So if you think it's weird to say hi to somebody, then it's going to be weird. I find it weird that they're passing each other in the hall over and over again and not saying hi. But he said that nobody introduces themselves. And I said, well, just because nobody does, it doesn't mean you shouldn't. That you can be a leader and be the first one to take action, and good things might follow. What if he introduced himself to everyone on his floor? It might change the energy of the floor. Anyway, right after that, I took him to dinner at Houston's, which is one of his favorite restaurants. By the way, everything there is cooked to perfection. I have never had a bad meal, and it was the best steak. While we were waiting for our table, I wanted to get a drink at the bar. So I walked up to the corner of the bar, and there was a single guy dining alone on my left, and there was another single guy dining alone on my right. And all 3 of us had a prime spot at the bar with a clear view of everyone sitting there. The only issue was that these 2 guys seemed disengaged. I mean, I noticed it before I even walked up to the bar that these guys weren't talking to each other at all. And they were kind of in their own world, focused on whatever was in front of them. But they hadn't turned. There was no eye contact. They hadn't acknowledged each other. It kind of reminded me of the vibe at my son's dorm room. Anyway, I ordered my drink and I stood there for a while, and neither of them made eye contact with me or even acknowledged that I was standing there now too. It was like I didn't exist and none of us existed. We were all sitting there by ourselves. It wouldn't have been that awkward if I'd been at the bar for only a moment, but I was there for a while. And honestly, at some point I started thinking it was kind of funny. So I couldn't resist. I joked, "How long have you guys been together?" And that finally broke the ice. The guy on the left started talking. He said to me, he thought it was weird that people don't talk to each other and agreed that it is good to start talking to other people, like at the bar. And then he shared a story about how he decided to talk to the guy that was next to him on the plane. And that led to him getting hooked up with free Taylor Swift tickets in a prime location for him and his daughter. And then the guy on the right said that it was serendipitous that I showed up because he had just talked to a friend earlier that day about how opportunities appear when you start talking to people next to you. And so there I was. And then my son walked over and all of us ended up having a great time at the bar until our table was ready. So my son and I had dinner, and when we were almost done with dinner, I glanced over to the bar, and these guys were still talking to each other. I mean, they were there before we sat down for dinner. And that really made my night because it looked like they were having a great time. It's just so crazy because earlier they had not even made eye contact, and now they were fully engaged, and it was just a great thing to see. So when we were about to leave, they both came over to our table to thank us for creating that connection. And this is what this podcast is about. It's about connecting people, sharing stories, and realizing that we're not as different as we might think. And that's exactly what I wanted to show my son. It was crazy that the perfect moment came up for me to demonstrate it. But that happened because I started the conversation. So amazing things can happen when you take the time to talk to somebody. Of course, we all need to use some discretion about who we talk to, but it's also important not to judge people by their appearance. You never know. You might have something in common or learn something valuable from them. And that's why I started a podcast in Santa Barbara. It's a friendly town. People smile at each other. For the most part, they talk to each other at restaurants. It's beautiful and the energy is contagious. Community is the heart and soul of Santa Barbara. And with this podcast, I hope to promote the living in Santa Barbara lifestyle and mindset, and to bring you along this journey of discovery and connection, no matter where you live, whether it's in Idaho or anywhere else. This podcast is not just for people that live in Santa Barbara. It's also for people new to Santa Barbara or that are going to move here, or people that want to visit here or want to know what it's like to live in Santa Barbara or what other communities are doing. How are they staying happy? How are they living their best life? So I hope this podcast stimulates you, creates moments of reflection, and encourages you to connect and maybe even sends you off in a new direction. So subscribe, join me each Tuesday, and hopefully you'll want to share this podcast with the people you care about so we can all spread the message about building a stronger community and deeper connections. Thank you for listening.